couple introduce myself. So my name's David Barnes. I'm head of discipline here at the RFU. My role is to deal with breaches of regulation in the adult and the age grade game. And as I say, it's a discipline focus, but we work very closely with the safeguarding team. I'm going to pass to Josh, who's on the call, who will then pass to Viv, and then onwards. But thank you for attending, and please put your questions in the chat. It'd be really useful to know. There's a couple in there already, but know where you're all from and your role. So as we go through the intros, put your intro in. It'd be really helpful to see that.
Hi, good evening. My name is Josh Peter. I'm a discipline case officer, and a large part of my role is supporting David in all discipline matters, a large part of which is investigating allegations of discriminatory behaviour. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Viv Rimmer. I'm head of safeguarding for the RFU. So I've got overall responsibility for our safeguarding function in the community and the professional game. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kath Bennett. I'm the safeguarding case manager. So I oversee all the referrals and concerns that come into the safeguarding team, oversee any investigations or referrals onto other agencies, and work very closely with David and Josh in these areas. The videos, I think, were really key this evening to set the context of the webinar and some of the matters that we're currently seeing within the game. And we hope that this evening we will have an understanding of how discipline and safeguarding work and our remits, how we work together very successfully, understanding the citing procedures in the age grade game and how and when to report non-citing incidents, and managing incidents as we've seen when persons enter the field of play. The focus tonight on safeguarding is the safeguarding of children and when those incidents happen and they overlap with the discipline. We know from experience that many club safeguarding officers will end up having matters on their desk, which is not a safeguarding matter, but because it involves a child or the word safe, it will end up on their desk in order for them to manage or refer on. There are, however, clear responsibilities for other club officials in some of the areas that we're going to discuss this evening. If you look in the role descriptor for the club safeguarding officer, we say that the club safeguarding officer should know how to apply the safeguarding policy, Regulation 21 safeguarding, as well as Regulation 9, Regulation 15, and also be able to provide support to the club discipline officer when we're dealing with age grade matters, as well as supporting other volunteers in their roles at the club. So the RFU safeguarding team work extremely closely together, and we will often discuss the best way to case manage a situation where there is an element of both Regulation 21 safeguarding and Regulation 19. So in order to gain an understanding of who we've got on the call, and I know you're putting items into chat, let's have a look to see who you are on the call tonight. So if you can just fill in what your primary role is in rugby union, just a single choice, and then that will give us an understanding of who we've got on the call tonight.
Well, while we're just doing that, we've had a question come in already, which I can deal with right away to thank the people and encourage hopefully a few more questions. But we've been asked the question whether should age grade rugby have a safeguarding officer and a disciplinary officer in each club. So in regulation, the club must have a discipline officer and a safeguarding officer. So the discipline officer can cover both the adult and the age grade. I guess if you want to go gold standard, given that the discipline regulations for children or people under 18 are child-centric and slightly different to the adult process, if a club was to have a dedicated age grade discipline officer in the club, that would be gold standard. So hopefully that answers that question to you.
Well, there we are. So there's the results of the polls. So half of you on the call tonight are the club safeguarding officer. We've got some safeguarding managers from the CB, and then the rest made up of club discipline, CB discipline, coaches and other committee members. So thank you very much for completing that. We're going to move on really to let's have a look about the available resources that you already have, which will help supplement this this webinar. And much of this will be found on the England Rugby website. What I would say is that if you are a club safeguarding officer and you haven't yet completed the In Touch course, then please do so. We also would welcome any club committee member on the In Touch course, any CB member on the In Touch course as well. So your available resources, Regulation 21, the safeguarding policy, not only the RFU one, but your club safeguarding policy, the Code of Conduct, which I'll come back to shortly, Regulation 19, Regulation 19 Appendix 6, which details age grade rugby disciplinary procedures. There's also advice on the website about the collaboration between safeguarding and discipline, which we touch on some of that this evening. And there's lots of other additional guidance resources on the safeguarding pages of England Rugby and also on the discipline pages. Now, the Code of Conduct is really key to some of these behaviours that we're seeing this evening. And we really do encourage you as a club to use your Code of Conduct, and more firmly, especially when we're seeing incidents in the videos. Obviously, when those matters happen, where we see adults going onto the field of play, your club Code of Conduct is not being abided by. So how are you going to reinforce that when such incidents occur? So that's something to take away this evening, to really think about how you're using and enforcing your Code of Conduct. So safeguarding and discipline. Let's see how they work, and this is a brief overview. So Regulation 21 safeguarding, and we must remember this is just in relation to rugby union. If you're involved in another sport, it may be different. So we really need to be mindful that this is in the context of rugby union. So Regulation 21 is the prevention of harm and poor practice towards children and adults, promoting their safety and well-being. It is a statutory requirement. We have to follow the law, and we have to follow statutory guidance. With safeguarding, there's no automatic delegation to CBs or clubs. The RFU have jurisdiction over all safeguarding matters, and they must be reported to the RFU safeguarding team. Responses to harm or abuse is managed by the RFU safeguarding team, and we make a decision on how that is best case managed. David, if you just want to go over discipline.
Thank you, Kath. Sorry, I'm just popping away here. This discipline is picked up under RFU Regulation 19. We've tried to make the regulations a bit more plain English in the last year, and the main regulation has been amended for this year. We're working through the age grade version, and that should be changed ahead of next year to make it a bit easier to understand. But Regulation 19 is discipline, and then Appendix 6 of that is related to the age grade game, which has different sanctions. Whilst it's very similar, the age grade is much more child-centric and much more focused on an educational return. So there's an ability for panels not just to put sanctions in place, but to focus on not just put match bans in place, but to focus on alternative sanctions, be that education or tackling courses or anything that the panel feel will help this child, or possibly the whole group of children, if it's a team, actually learn and develop and help them on their way. So that's Regulation 19. It comes from World Rugby. So everything we do has to come from World Rugby. So they mandate that we are exactly the same as Wales, as New Zealand, as every union in the world in terms of our sanction and the outline process. We are one of only a couple of unions who have the educational element in, but I believe others are going to follow us that way. But World Rugby set it, and then we rolled it out. Mostly disciplines focused on field, so high tackles, late tackles, occasionally punches, strikes. But that's what a lot of our discipline focuses on field, and then off field we deal with misconduct. And in the age grade game, that actually hits two main areas. Obviously, we're responsible for the behaviour of the children themselves and how they behave on and off the field, but also for adults. So as we've just seen in some of those clips, people coming onto the field in an age grade game would be picked up potentially by discipline, as obviously as well as safeguarding, and they'd be dealt with under our regulations. Adults, even if it's an age grade game, adults are dealt with under the adult regulations. And as I say, the RFU deals with all breaches of competition regs, be it the half game rule, be it safeguarding regulations, be it anything to do with regulations. We will essentially ask an independent panel to look at that. And the way our discipline process works, the RFU look after the top levels of the game, and then we delegate a lot back to your local counties. So I've seen people on here from Cornwall, for example. I think Jane's on here from Cornwall. I think Bob Hardman's on here from Bucks. So we've got the discipline officers from the local area who will deal with many of our cases. And in turn, in the age grade game, we ask the clubs to who know the child best to deal with cases. But we have full oversight of that and make sure that that's done properly. Now, there are some things that we don't delegate in any way, and we'll come to as well a bit later on. But things like discriminatory language or behaviours will come directly to the RFU. Police cases will come to the RFU, or cases with serious injury are just three of the examples that we would see. So that's a bit of discipline and where that fits. And I'll pass back to Kath.
Okay. When we're talking about CBs, we're talking about constituent bodies, i.e. Your counties. So just to be clear on that, and we just refer to them as CBs, so your CBSM, CB Safeguarding Manager. So Dave touched on the exclusions from delegation back to CBs, and this is also where the overlap comes with safeguarding. So we don't delegate back to CBs all cases involving serious injury, cases that are on investigation by the police, and as Dave said, all cases involving verbal or physical abuse protected by based on protected characteristics. So we're talking about racial abuse, for example, and this relates to both the adult and the age grade game. In addition, we start to see overlaps as well in relation to the foul play on the age grade game, including actions and behaviour of spectators, as we've seen in the videos, the entry in the field of play, the abuse of young match officials. There's often an overlap there, and on occasions a breach of Regulation 15 age grade that has led to harm to a child. So we're going to do a couple of scenarios here, which we will explain where safeguarding and discipline come into it, and followed by a poll to take your answers. So this is quite a typical scenario. The parent of an under 15 player states that their daughter received a punch to the head by an opposition player in an off-ball incident. They know the player as they go to school together. The referee did not see it, and the under 15s coach said he would have a word. The parent wants a full safeguarding investigation. So we've got a poll coming up. Alex put the poll up. So we'd like to have an understanding of how you think this should be managed. Is this a discipline matter? Is this a safeguarding matter? Is it both, or is it something else? And so please add your response to the chat. So a parent of a player states that the player received a punch to the head In an off-ball incident, the player knows the opposition player who did it because they go to school together. The referee didn't take any action, so there was no red card at the time, and the parent wants a full safeguarding investigation. How should this be managed? Have we got the results up yet?
Just final few just to come in. And I think I'll close it now. And the results are with you now, Kath.
Well, there we are. Okay, so 51% saying it's a discipline matter, 1 safeguarding, and then 47, which half of you have said both. And we've got 1 response in the chat. So you pick that up, Viv, how they thought it should be managed?
No, so I think they've ticked for it to go in the chat, but I can't see anything in there. There's a question about whether or not it's a one-off clash between the two.
There's a question. Is this a one-off clash between the two? Was the question in the webinar chat.
Okay, all right. Well, we don't know whether it's a one-off clash. We've got this particular incident where there was an act of foul play. The referee didn't see it. So we are going to consider whether this is dealt with as foul play and a citing procedure. So David, you might want to explain the citing procedure, because this is very much in your, and then I'll go on to the overlaps.
Thanks, Kath. So, yeah, the citing process is the way that any act of foul play can be brought to the attention of a disciplinary panel. And this is any act of foul play that was not seen by the referee, but it can also apply to instances that may have been seen by the referee, but they were given a penalty or a yellow card or not a red card. So by referring these incidents, and there's a strict time limit of 7 days, so they must be referred within 7 days to the constituent body, so to the local discipline officer, and then that will mean it will trigger a hearing process, and the case can be heard to decide if the red card threshold is met. So we often receive concerns from people watching games, talking about incidents. We can only accept citings from the club, so they must come from a club person, but there is a clear process to do that. There's no cost involved for age grade players as opposed to adults, and that process will allow essentially the discipline process to start. Where I think it is important to point out is we have seen where some clubs will have an informal arrangement, and they will ask the other club to look at something, and then they will be sometimes disappointed with the response of the other club. If that approach is taken and we're past 7 days, we can't then start a citing. So if there is a serious incident of foul play, the process can be followed and a citing can be put forward. But that's how that process works. And as I say, the normal hearing process follows.
Now, we've heard David say that this would be a discipline process. We've got the act of foul play, which is also an assault, and the parent is at liberty to make a report to the police if they wish to. But this doesn't mean to say that safeguarding won't have any role in this. There is a role for safeguarding. Firstly, to ensure support for the child. It might mean that there is a hearing, so we want support for that child to sometimes kind of give evidence, and that support's usually carried out by the club safeguarding officer or the CB safeguarding manager, or sometimes even their own coach as well as the parents. There might be a requirement for any possible referral to children's services or other agencies for support for the child that's been assaulted, but also support for the child that has brought about the foul play. And in this particular scenario, you would have picked up that both the players go to school together. So there's a potential role for safeguarding to liaise with the school to make sure that there's no repercussions and both players are safe within the school. So although managed by a discipline, there's still a safeguarding support element that may be required. So we're going to go on to the second example. An under-16 player reports that in the clubhouse post-match, he was racially abused by an opposition player and that player's parent. The under-16 player was visibly distressed by this incident. So going back to our polls again, Alex, how would you believe that this matter should be managed? Is it a discipline, a safeguarding, both, or another? So this is in relation to an under-16 player in the clubhouse post-match reporting that he has been racially abused. How do you think this will be managed? Are we nearly there, Alex?
Yeah, give the last little chance for the last few to respond. And I'm going to close it there and share.
Well, there we are. So discipline, 8%, safeguarding 22, and both 69. So let's take a look at how this would be managed within rugby union. So going back to those processes that are not delegated back to CBs by David's team. So all cases involving verbal or physical abuse based on protected characteristics. This is racial abuse. So if reported to the RFU safeguarding team, we would acknowledge it, but then we would liaise with David and Josh and pass the matter over to them. However, this doesn't negate the responsibility that we have for the well-being of this player. And it goes back to the previous scenario where we would expect that player to be supported, again, usually by the club safeguarding officer, but sometimes by the CB safeguarding manager. And the club or safeguarding officer or CB manager might come to the RFU for available guidance. And again, as per the first scenario, there's that possible referral to children's services or other agencies for support or intervention for the victim of the abuse and also for the alleged perpetrator. But because it's managed by discipline, it doesn't necessarily mean that safeguarding again don't have a supporting role, but it's not necessarily going to be managed by the safeguarding team. Josh, do you want to come in and give your experience of these processes that are currently taking place?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Kath. So in these scenarios, RFU discipline will want to take swift and quick action, and that's especially in relation to the investigation itself. Once in many of these cases referred over from safeguarding, the investigation will begin, and naturally this will take more of a child-centric approach compared to that of the adult game. And in relation to this, the RFU is also education first. Now, in a lot of these instances, the RFU will, regardless of outcome, be mandating education for the team in which the alleged perpetrators to be involved. What's worth noting in these matters is that time is of the essence. This is as evidential integrity in terms of witness statements as, you can imagine a game in a park on a Sunday morning isn't like to be recorded. And as such, time is of the essence in getting statements. And it's important in these scenarios that the children are put first. And we take that view in the investigation process itself. I've just seen a question in the chat about who should be doing this investigation. the investigation should come to us first, and the RFU will be working with the designated individual at the club. That may be in many instances the safeguarding lead, or it may be the discipline lead, or it may be a combination of the two. But it's important to note that it must come to us first, and then decisions can be made once it's come to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. And what we'd say is that when these come, they usually come into the safeguarding team first, and we have those close conversations usually on a Monday morning. We're all in the office on a Monday morning, so we have those conversations about the management of the case and then also the relevant support. Any more questions, Viv, in the chat that we need to refer to at this stage?
Sorry, yeah, thanks, Kath. We've got a few questions that are coming in. If I don't get to all of them, we may well put a Q&A document together. So I'm just trying to collate some of the questions now. But David, probably a question for you initially. So in scenario 1, Kath mentioned about the potential for parents making contact with the police. What happens at that point? So if there's a police investigation, but we know that there's a disciplinary process within the RFU, what would happen at that point?
Sure. So if there is a police investigation that takes place, or we're told that there is a police investigation, we must pause our process. So we must stop any investigation due to risk of prejudicing any case. What that means is that it can sometimes be many weeks or sometimes, unfortunately, months until we can actually hear a case or start to collate evidence. And we have to observe. We have to comply with what the police want, and obviously that does mean some frustration. Now, this also goes to a different point. If someone's given a red card, they are banned until we hear the card. Now, if the police are involved, we might not be able to hear that for a long time. We are looking at a regulation change to essentially allow a player back after a set period of time, should it drag on that long. With citing, they can keep playing, but we may take the option to interim suspend a person. But just the crossover with the police, just to say we can't act, and that's a direction we've had from them. And I know it can be frustrating, but we obviously have to respect the process.
Lovely, thanks, David. There's also a question in relation to, I guess, support for age grade players who might be going through a club or even a CB, I guess, disciplinary process. Just in terms of, I guess, support for players. And my advice absolutely would be, if we've got disciplinaries, whether or not they're club or CB disciplinaries, actually, it's a really good idea to involve and to seek some advice from your club safeguarding officer or your CB safeguarding manager. We would want to try and make sure, notwithstanding the fact that there's a process that needs to be completed, but we want to try and make sure that any meetings or hearings are as child friendly as possible. I guess so. Some of that might be practical, might it? It might be thinking around practical arrangements. So perhaps the time of the meeting being earlier in the evening rather than kind of leaving an age grade player until last. It might be thinking around additional support that might be needed for a child in terms of having somebody with them, making sure that they understand the process. So thinking around the support that they've had and the preparation that they've had. Clearly, the lower the age, the more careful you're going to need to be in terms of those arrangements, with kind of having very child-focused meetings, particularly with those lower age groups within clubs. But I would suggest that we'd want to try to make sure that those processes are as child-friendly as they can be. And again, we want some learning, don't we, from our age grade players? So making sure that they understand the what and the why. Anything else that you'd want to add to that, David?
No, Viv, you've covered a number of key points there. It's the child-centric element, and just remembering that they aren't adults, and it's a very, very stressful experience for an age grade player to go through a hearing, especially an RFU hearing, and we have to consider that with it when we're deciding on any cases. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Viv.
No worries.
So now we're going to deal with the field of play and the physical intervention. So reflecting on those videos that we saw at the start of the session this evening. And you can see from those videos that when somebody enters the field of play, this does escalate to physical intervention with the age grade players and escalates the whole situation. And it is predominantly adults, whether coaches or spectators, coming onto that field. So with the use of VEO cameras to analyse and track matches and training fixtures, you can see that it captures the more negative aspects of the game, and basically the camera never lies. The VEO of an event or any video film of an event is the most reliable and accurate evidence and the most trustworthy source of information compared to any verbal reports or second-hand accounts of the event. Any VEO or video recording of such an incident will be used for safeguarding and discipline purposes, and both departments under their respective regulations can ask clubs to provide this, and we will talk further about VEO and video coverage. So David is going to talk about entering the field of play now.
Oops, hold on. Sorry, I disappeared. Thanks, Kath, and thanks for the questions that are coming in. We're getting some questions on both formats, the Q&A and the webinar chat, but keep putting in the Q&A as well, and we will keep responding to those. We're going to come on to talking about permissions as well. So, Sean, I just note your question there. In terms of entering the field, it's really important, as I sort of briefly mentioned at the start, for those who are on, no one can enter the field without the permission of the referee. And clearly, the laws are aimed at players, and they're slightly silent towards spectators, but no one should expect a spectator to enter the field, especially not in an age grade game. And we know that the behaviour of the touchline is often dictated by the behaviour of the coaches. There seems to be a strong correlation with coaches, and if the coaches are setting the right example, that can obviously help the touchline as well. In terms of what we have in place, we will talk through the regulatory position, but it is essentially a strict liability offence, be it for a spectator or a player to enter the field without the authority of the referee.
Thank you, David. And then the next part of entering the field of play is that physical intervention, as you've seen this evening. And it's quite clear in the RFU safeguarding policy, and we make reference to this. I think it's page 21. I'm often quoting this to clubs, that physical intervention should only take place when it's absolutely necessary to prevent a child being hurt. And as regards in any setting, and we're not talking just about rugby or sport, reasonable force is the amount of force that is justified to defend yourself or others from harm. It must be proportionate to the threat and not excessive. So a person entering the field of play and who uses physical intervention must justify their actions and the force used. Now, that justification is not only to the RFU, but could be justification to the police and law enforcement agencies. Now, I've been in post at the RFU for 12 years. I have never received a complaint that a coach or an adult has physically intervened with their own player. Adults entering the field of play who become physically involved with players often cite that it was to prevent harm to their own player. But we always see on these videos that the welfare of their own player is disregarded as they're engaging with the opposition. We've heard the term, or you may have heard the term red mist, and that is what is happening. As red mist forms, there's a sudden feeling of anger and frustration from the adults, leading to a clouding of their judgment, and then that leads to harm to a child. As said, any person who becomes involved with a player on the field of play, whether it's their own or an opposition, must justify their actions, whether it be to the RFU or to the police. David, your slide.
Thanks, Kath. So, yeah, if it does happen, then if someone does come on the field, a regulation that's been used a lot around the country in this season is Regulation 19.3.18. In short, anyone who enters the field, it will be or can be immediately suspended from all rugby for up to 4 weeks. That may not be the end of it, but what that initial 4 weeks does, it allows the discipline process to have a look at what happened and the safeguarding process as well. It allows us to have a look to review the footage if there's some available, or the statements, and determine if there may be a further case to answer, so that it may go to a further disciplinary panel, or that it may be no further action. But that interim suspension is something that is delegated by the RFU to the regional leads within the constituent bodies, the CBs. And as I say, it's a strong regulation. We didn't realize we'd be using it as much as we have. And it has been very important for us to focus people's minds on, first of all, understanding the issue, but also then gathering the information we need very quickly, because that person remains banned until we can get that information. Similarly, in terms of the regulation, there's an obligation for the club to take all reasonable steps to stop people coming onto the field. This is a slightly different regulation, but I think it's important to highlight that if we're all familiar, I think, with respect barriers, for example, if someone enters the field and there had been no respect barriers in place, or there'd been nothing put up to stop people, the disciplinary panel, should they think it's a serious offence, may find the club more responsible for the actions of that individual. So what I'm saying is, whilst it's the individual who'll be interim suspended, it could also be the club that face sanctions for someone coming onto the field, or also for their behaviour. So for abusing children, for example, or for match official abuse. But there's an obligation on the club to make sure they're proactively stopping this behaviour. Discipline only comes in when something's gone wrong, and I think we all want things not to go wrong. So proactive measures with the club, helping create an environment that's better for all, has got to be the way forward. And then finally, just on this last bit, when an interim suspension is issued against a parent, or often it's a parent because they're a spectator at the game, there are set rules for what they can and can't do as part of that suspension. And I won't go into full detail, but in brief, they can still take their child to matches. They just can't be around the field, and in some cases can't be in the clubhouse. So we're not trying to stop the child playing rugby. We always try and accommodate that, even if a parent is subject to a ban. But that's all set out in the form, should that be sent out to anyone.
Thank you, David. When we talk about these matters that discipline are going to deal with, discipline and safeguarding work very closely together, and we would hope that within your clubs, discipline and safeguarding leads work closely together, and very much the same within the CBs. And the safeguarding involvement, as we've touched on this evening, is always support for the child. And when we're talking about these entering the field of play and physical intervention, our involvement also extends to, well, does that person hold a position of trust within rugby? Was it a coach? Was it a first aider? Was it a team manager that's allegedly assaulted a child? We also have the involvement that if it's identified that the parent or spectator who's entered the field of play and assaulted a child is in a position of trust outside of rugby, i.e. they're a teacher or they're a volunteer in another setting, i.e. scout leader or sports coach elsewhere. Safeguarding will look at that, and then there's the potential for the RFU to liaise, and for those of you who are safeguarding officers will know the term, to liaise with the LADO, the local authority designated officer. And also as well, we will, in some instances, the RFU safeguarding team will help Dave and Josh liaise with the police. So what we need to be mindful of is that it may not be a discipline process or managed under safeguarding, but safeguarding does have a role to play. So safeguarding and not ignoring it, we have a role to play, but consider that the best outcome at times is going to be achieved under the discipline process.
Kath, can I just jump in? Well, you've come to questions, so that's a perfect
Right.
for me to jump
Okay.
in. I just noticed a question there that we get asked quite a lot with this new regulation. So obviously it's a strict liability offence in a way that of people coming on the field. And a question's been asked to me, what about if they're coming on to treat an injured player or to assist, stabilize a player or provide physio? So absolutely, if a person comes on for a medical reason or for something like that, I would not expect any action to be taken against them. If they're going on to assist the player, then that is important, and we would never prevent that. Where we would look at something like that is if, for example, and it doesn't happen very often, someone came on to treat a player and then got involved in another incident. Post that, then we'd look at it. But absolutely, that's not designed to stop people providing first aid care to people on the field.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions in there, David?
Sorry, Kath, I've seen a scenario that's been posed. The scenario is posed, so we have a scenario where a Colts player was at a supermarket in team kit fundraising. The allegation from a member of the public was that racist language was used towards them by a player. No disciplinary panel was undertaken by the club as there was a counter allegation from the player of subsequent abuse and threats made to him by members of the public's friends some 2 weeks later. Should this have been referred to the RFU given the mention of anything involving racist language? The answer is yes. Under the regulation mentioned earlier, 19.2.18G, it should be referred. I think another important part about this is as with all age grade, to have a child-centric approach, an educational outcome is often one of the more desirable outcomes. And if we're made aware of incidents, for instance, in the age grade game, we have the RFU equality in rugby module, and this sounds like a very good scenario where something like that could be employed. But we can only employ these measures where we're made aware of those incidents. So in short, yes, that should have been referred. Sorry, thanks, Kath.
Okay. And just to kind of clarify some matters about the use of VO and video footage, we often get contact from clubs to say that we have a child who's subject to a child protection order and they cannot be filmed. Now, I think we need to be quite clear is that the VO can still be used. However, the clubs are then responsible of how they manage that VEO footage. Now, in some of those videos that you saw at the beginning of the evening, the VEO footage has been released by the club to parents and players and then posted on social media. So we need to be mindful that the VEO is an excellent way of analysing training and fixtures, and obviously is extremely useful when there's discipline or safeguarding matters. And clubs really need to be mindful of how they manage those VEOs, because ultimately they are personal data. So the clubs need to ensure that they have the relevant privacy notices and GDPR requirements about managing that VEO coverage. And it's not something that should be readily shared with parents and players. And when you are talking about consent, especially with the opposition, you need to be mindful that there may be children who are subject to child protection orders. That means that footage cannot be shared more widely. Anything else in the questions before I move on? No. If we, as we've said earlier, if we can't answer all the questions this evening, then we will do a Q&A document and circulate it to everybody on the call tonight. So the key messages to take away from this evening when you're looking at that interplay between safeguarding and discipline, what type of incident has occurred? Is it a breach of Regulation 21? Has there been harm to a child? Has there been clear abuse? Is it in relation to Regulation 19, i.e. foul play, racial abuse, or a mixture of the both? You really need good communication between your club discipline and club safeguarding, as well as CB discipline and CB safeguarding, as we have at the RFU. Please educate your coaches and team managers in respect of citing procedures. It is quite apparent that a lot of coaches don't understand the process. As we've seen this evening, some incidents raise both issues and it needs careful management. Make use of your code of conduct. It's there for a reason, so make use of it. Work collaboratively with the club, the CB and the RFU safeguarding teams, because we all want the best outcome for our players and we will all want the best outcome for the game. Do not delay in making the RFU aware. Do not sit on it and ponder about it. And if you are in doubt about whether it should be safeguarding or discipline or a matter for either department, then please contact the RFU and we can talk you through it and then make the best decision. And most of the time we'll be saying it needs to come to us. In order to do that, most of the time it's a referral into the RFU safeguarding team, and then we'll liaise with our discipline colleagues. So please don't, not refer something to us because you think there's probably a discipline element to us. We will work that out and sort it out. Please use the web-based reporting form that has now replaced the old PDF. That web-based reporting form goes straight into our case management system. And then if it's a discipline matter, I can easily and straightforwardly and quickly refer it to Josh, and Josh picks it up electronically. If you have any queries, then the safeguarding email address is there, and also the discipline email address is there. And we are more than happy to receive those queries, talk you through, and make a decision about the management in very early stages, rather than try and sort out something two weeks, sometimes 2 months down the line. So please never hesitate to make contact with us. So we are coming towards the end of the webinar, and we're just going to take any final questions if we've got any in the chat, Dave and Josh.
So there's a few questions coming in here. I've dealt with a couple. One of the question was, should the CB safeguarding manager be informed by their CB discipline if they're dealing with age grade? Obviously within the CB, we'd hope that everyone's talking to each other. I think where there are, if I call it straightforward, well, some things aren't overly straightforward, but where there are straightforward discipline matters, a CB discipline officer might just get on with those and not refer those to a safeguarding officer. But where we've got these more complex cases, I would hope that everyone's talking and they're working out the best approach to support the child and also to deal with the incident itself. So there's no set rule, but we would hope that people are talking to each other. I'll hand over to Josh if he wants to answer one, or Kath.
Yeah, I can't see any of the questions at the moment.
Okay.
There is one in there. How should verbal abuse to the coaching team be dealt with? by adults pitch side.
Josh, you happy, or do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, happy to take that one. So it obviously depends on the nature of the abuse. I think, I said earlier, if it is discriminatory, of course, it would be dealt with by us, but it would naturally be dealt with by CB should it be verbal abuse below that level, is probably the appropriate answer.
Yeah, absolutely support that. It's a code of conduct issue and it's a potential misconduct charge should it reach a certain threshold. But again, we would hope that clubs themselves are proactively policing the sideline or making sure those behaviours aren't there. And we offer courses like bystander training and other courses that are available to your club should you want them that can help clubs address some of these issues. But it will depend on obviously the level and where it goes to.
We had another really interesting question about how do you deal with an allegation of verbal abuse, but those making the allegations do not want to make a referral to the RFU. If this is relating to verbal abuse based on a protected characteristic, this is something that the RFU is becoming increasingly aware of, and that is informal reporting versus formal reporting. And individuals are 3 times more likely to report informally than they are formally. Now, I think a big element of this is respecting the wishes of the victim in relation to this abuse. The RFU would struggle in any event if, for instance, someone comes forward on an anonymous basis and wants to take something forward. The RFU would struggle to take cases forward because people naturally have the right to reply, and when they don't have the ability to challenge certain evidence, this diminishes the ability for the RFU to take action. But that is a very difficult situation, but the wishes of the victim should be respected.
Thank you, Josh. I think we're coming to wrap up the evening now, and I very much appreciate you all giving up your evening, and we hope that you've found this particularly useful. And if you do have any questions after you've gone away and reflected on this evening, then please drop either safeguarding or discipline a line. We will be collating all the questions and putting out a Q&A document, and we'll get that sent round to all the delegates. So really, I think from all of us at the RFU, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening. We hope that it's brought a better understanding how the two departments and yourselves can work together in order that the game is respected and your club members respect the code of conduct, and quite clear about when you do refer matters to the RFU that we're not dismissing our responsibilities, but we work closely together to ensure that we get the best outcome. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, and we're going to say goodnight to you. Thank you very much.